Jack Harlow stepped off the transport shuttle and onto the gleaming floor of Proxima Station. He rolled his shoulders, trying to work out the stiffness from the long journey. His worn blue jumpsuit had seen better days, and the toolbox he carried was scratched and dented from years of use. But the tools inside were in perfect condition. Jack made sure of that. He looked up at the Galactic Summit Hotel, its massive structure dominating this section of the space station. The building curved upward in flowing lines, with shimmering glass and metal that caught the light from the nearby star. It was beautiful, but Jack's trained eye could see past the beauty to the complex systems that kept it running. Jack checked the time on his wrist device. He was early for his inspection, which was exactly as he planned. He liked to observe operations during normal business hours before anyone knew he was around. The hotel lobby bustled with activity. Beings from at least 8 different species moved about, some floating, others walking on various numbers of limbs. Service robots glided silently between groups, carrying luggage or serving drinks. The air smelled of exotic flowers and the special cleaning solution used to make the environment comfortable for all species. Jack approached the front desk, where a Vexillian was working. Her name tag read Zixalora. She had iridescent purple, scales that shimmered when she moved, and her 6 slender arms worked quickly at multiple screens. Vexillians were known for their efficiency, their beauty, and unfortunately their strong belief in their superiority over lesser species, especially humans. Jack waited patiently while Zixalora finished helping a tall, tentacled diplomat. When it was finally his turn, he stepped forward with a polite smile. "Good morning. I need access to the maintenance areas and central systems," Jack said, placing his ID card on the counter. Zixalora looked up, her large amber eyes narrowing. When she saw him, she glanced at his toolbox, his worn clothes, and then at his face. Her mouth formed a small, tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "The service entrance is on level B, human. This is the guest reception area." Her voice had the musical quality, typical of her species, but her tone was cold. "I understand," Jack said calmly. "But I need to check in here first. My credentials are on the card." Zixalora made a small huffing sound and picked up his ID with 2 of her fingers, holding it as if it might be dirty. She didn't put it into the scanner right away. "We weren't informed of any scheduled maintenance today. The chief engineer would have told me." She looked at him suspiciously. "What exactly are you here to fix?" Before Jack could answer, a group of elegant beings with translucent skin approached the desk. Zixalora immediately brightened. "One moment, please," she said to Jack, though it wasn't really a request. She placed his ID card down on the counter and turned her full attention to the new arrivals. "Ambassador Lumen, what an honor to welcome you and your delegation to the Galactic Summit Hotel. We have your royal suite prepared exactly to your specifications." Jack waited patiently as Zixalora spent the next 15 minutes checking in the delegation, using all 6 of her arms to process their information, provide key cards, and gesture toward various amenities in the hotel. She called over 3 assistant managers to escort the group to their rooms. During this time, a young human woman behind the concierge desk kept glancing over. She had short brown hair and a name tag that read Megan Porter. She seemed concerned about how long Jack had been kept waiting, but she didn't intervene. Finally, Zixalora turned back to Jack, looking annoyed that he was still there. "Now, what was it again?" she asked, not bothering to hide her impatience. "I need access to the maintenance systems," Jack repeated, pointing to his ID card that still lay untouched on the counter. Zixalora sighed dramatically and finally picked up the card, inserting it into her scanner with obvious reluctance. She looked at the screen, frowned slightly, but didn't seem to read it carefully. "Your authorization seems to be in order, though I can't imagine why they would send someone like you for a system check during a diplomatic conference." She looked him up and down again. "The cleaning staff must have lowered standards recently." A few of the other alien staff members at nearby positions snickered quietly. Jack just nodded, his face showing no reaction to the insult. Zixalora continued typing, her fingers moving quickly. "I'll assign you a room in the service quarters. Level B, room S14. It's small, but should be adequate for your species. Jack knew that human guests were normally given rooms with views of space, not stuck in the windowless service level, but he simply nodded again. Thank you, he said. Do try not to disturb any of the important guests, Zixalora added, sliding a basic key card across the counter. And please use the service elevators only. Her voice lowered as she added, Your kind tends to make some of our distinguished guests uncomfortable. The young concierge, Megan, looked down at her desk, clearly embarrassed by her colleague's behavior. But like the others, she said nothing. Jack picked up the service-level key card and his ID. I'll do my best not to get in the way. As he turned to leave, Zixalora was already calling to another guest, her voice warm and welcoming again. Minister Krav, how wonderful to see you again. Your usual suite is ready and we've added those special air filters you requested. Jack walked toward the service elevator, nodding politely to the hotel staff he passed. Most avoided eye contact. A robot butler moved out of his path as if he might contaminate it. When he reached the service elevator, he used his key card and stepped inside. Once the doors closed, he pulled out a small device from his pocket and pressed his thumb against it. The screen lit up, showing a complete schematic of the hotel's systems. Several areas were highlighted in red: the atmospheric regulators for the methane-breathing guests, the gravity adjusters in the Centaurian wing, and the water filtration system for the aquatic delegates. Jack studied the diagrams with a small frown. His initial scans confirmed what the reports had suggested. There were significant problems with multiple critical systems, problems that could endanger guests if not addressed quickly. The elevator doors opened at level B, revealing a plain utilitarian corridor with harsh lighting. Jack stepped out and found room S14 easily enough. It was barely larger than a closet with a narrow cot, a tiny bathroom, and not much else. He set down his toolbox and sat on the edge of the cot. Taking out his communication device, he sent a simple message. Arrived. Beginning inspection. First impressions not positive. Jack looked around the tiny room and allowed himself a small smile. Zixalora and the others had no idea who he really was. They saw only what they expected to see, a human mechanic beneath their notice and unworthy of respect. Tomorrow would be interesting, Jack thought as he unpacked his specialized tools. Very interesting indeed. The next morning, Jack woke early. He dressed in the same worn jumpsuit as yesterday, picked up his toolbox and headed out to begin his inspection of the hotel's systems. The service corridors were already busy with staff preparing for the big day ahead. The Galactic Trade Summit would officially begin that afternoon, with delegates from 12 different species arriving throughout the morning. Jack made his way to the central control room, moving quietly through the maintenance tunnels that ran behind the walls of the hotel. These passages allowed staff to move around without disturbing the guests. The tunnels were hot and narrow, filled with pipes and cables. Most of the alien staff avoided these areas when possible. Their bodies weren't built for such tight spaces, but Jack moved through them easily, stopping occasionally to examine connections or check readings on various systems. When he reached the main atmospheric control room, he found it empty except for one junior technician, a young Tyrellian with bright orange skin who was half asleep at the monitoring station. Morning, Jack said. The Tyrellian jumped, nearly falling out of his chair. Who are you? How did you get in here? Jack showed his ID card. Jack Harlow. I'm here to check the systems. The technician relaxed slightly but still looked confused. Nobody told me about any inspection. It's not a scheduled visit, Jack explained. I'm here to look at the atmospheric regulators for the methane-breathing delegates. Oh, those are fine, the technician said quickly. We checked them last week. Jack nodded but moved to the main control panel anyway. I'll just have a quick look if you don't mind. The technician shrugged and went back to staring at his monitor, clearly not interested in what a human maintenance worker was doing. Jack spent the next 2 hours carefully examining the atmospheric regulators. What he found concerned him greatly. The calibration was off by nearly 12%. Not enough to cause immediate problems, but definitely enough to make the methane-breathing delegates sick after a few hours of exposure. Even worse, the backup system showed signs of tampering. Someone had disabled the automatic switchover that would activate if the main system failed. Jack took detailed notes and recorded evidence of the problems with his personal scanner. This wasn't just poor maintenance, this looked deliberate. He needed to report this immediately before the Kral and Voshian delegates arrived. Those species couldn't breathe oxygen at all. They required a carefully balanced methane mixture. Jack headed back through the maintenance tunnels toward the management offices. When he emerged into the main corridor, he was nearly knocked over by a group of hotel staff rushing past, carrying elaborate decorations for the welcome reception. The lobby was now transformed. Floating lights in various colors hovered near the ceiling. Exotic plants from a dozen worlds had been arranged in artistic displays. A large holographic sign read, "Welcome honored delegates to the 127th Galactic Trade Summit." Jack spotted the hotel manager, Keith Baldwin, standing near the front desk, looking anxious as he checked things on his tablet. Jack started to approach him but was intercepted by Zixalora, who stepped directly into his path. "What are you doing? In the guest area?" she demanded, her scales shifting to a darker purple color that indicated annoyance. "I specifically told you to use the service corridors." "I need to speak with Mr. Baldwin," Jack said. "It's urgent. There's a serious problem with the atmospheric systems for the methane-breathing delegates." Zixalora's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Baldwin is extremely busy preparing for the most important event of the year. He doesn't have time for maintenance issues." "This isn't just a maintenance issue," Jack insisted. "The atmospheric regulators have been deliberately miscalibrated. If it's not fixed before the Kral and Voshian delegates arrive, they could get very sick." Zixalora let out a musical laugh that drew the attention of nearby staff. "Are you suggesting that our highly qualified engineering team doesn't know how to calibrate atmospheric regulators? How amusing." She looked around at her colleagues, several of whom smiled at her mockery. "I'm not suggesting anything," Jack said calmly. "I'm telling you what I found. The backup systems have also been tampered with. This needs immediate attention." "Listen, human," Zixalora said, lowering her voice and leaning closer. "I don't know what you're trying to do here, but creating panic on the day of the summit is not acceptable. If you truly believe there's an issue, submit a formal report through the proper channels. Mr. Baldwin will review it when he has time." "That could take days," Jack pointed out. "The delegates arrive in hours." "Then you should have found this problem yesterday, shouldn't you?" Zixalora smiled coldly. "Now please return to whatever you're supposed to be doing and stay out of the guest areas, or I'll have security escort you out." Jack could see it was pointless to argue further. The receptionist had already made up her mind about him, and nothing he said would change it. He nodded stiffly and turned away. As he walked toward the service elevator, Megan Porter, the young concierge from yesterday, approached him hesitantly. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "I overheard what you were saying about the atmospheric systems." Jack paused. "Yes? I'm not an engineer, but, well, my brother works in atmospheric systems on Europa Colony. He talks about how dangerous miscalibrations can be." She looked around nervously. "Do you really think there's a problem?" "I know there is," Jack said, "but your colleague doesn't. Think my concerns are worth the manager's time." Megan bit her lip. "Zixalora can be difficult. She thinks all humans are primitive, but if there's really a danger..." She seemed to make up her mind about something. "Look, I can't get you to Mr. Baldwin right now, but I know the chief engineer, Greg. He's human too. Maybe he'll listen?" "That would help," Jack said, giving her a grateful smile. "He should be in his office on level C, I can show you." Jack followed Megan to the service elevator and down to level C. As they walked, he pulled out his tablet and showed her the readings he'd taken. "These numbers don't mean much to me," Megan admitted, looking at the complex diagrams and data, "but you seem to know what you're talking about." "I've worked with these systems before," Jack said simply. Megan looked at him with new interest. "You must be pretty good at your job to be sent to inspect the Galactic Summit Hotel. This is one of the most prestigious venues in this sector." Before Jack could respond, they reached the chief engineer's office. The door was open, but the room was empty. "That's strange," Megan said, frowning. "Greg is usually here this time of day." Jack checked the time. "The reception starts in 2 hours. He's probably doing final checks." I'll keep trying to find him, Megan promised. Or maybe I can get Mr. Baldwin's attention after the initial greeting ceremony. Thank you, Jack said. I'll continue checking the other systems. There might be more problems. As they parted ways, Jack's concern deepened. If someone had deliberately sabotaged the atmospheric systems, what else might they have tampered with? And more importantly, why? He needed to find a way to fix this before the delegates arrived, with or without the hotel staff's cooperation. Lives could depend on it. The grand reception hall of the Galactic Summit Hotel glowed with soft blue and green lights. Waiters moved between groups of delegates, carrying trays of food and drinks suited for different species. Music played softly in the background, a careful mix of sounds pleasant to all 12 species present. Hotel manager Keith Baldwin stood near the main entrance, greeting important guests with a fixed smile that didn't reach his eyes. He kept checking his communication device and wiping sweat from his forehead. Everything must be perfect, he muttered to himself. The owner will review the reports. My job depends on this. Across the room, Zixalora was showing a group of tall, tentacled beings to their special seating area. Her scales shimmered with pride as she spoke with the important delegates. This was her moment to shine, to prove her value to the hotel. In a corner of the reception, Megan Porter watched the proceedings with worry in her eyes. She hadn't been able to find the chief engineer, and Mr. Baldwin was too busy to speak with her. She looked around for Jack but didn't see him anywhere. Unknown to her, Jack was 3 levels below, moving quickly through the maintenance tunnels. His scan had detected a power surge in the methane atmosphere control system. Something was wrong, very wrong. He reached the control room and found it empty. The junior technician from earlier was gone. Jack rushed to the main panel and saw immediately that his fears were justified. The system was failing. The methane mix was becoming dangerously unbalanced. Jack pulled tools from his belt and got to work, bypassing the main controls that were no longer responding. He needed to activate the backup system manually, but as he had discovered earlier, someone had disabled it. His fingers moved quickly, reconnecting wires and reprogramming the override sequence. Sweat dripped down his face as he worked against time. Above, in the reception hall, a soft alarm began to sound. Most of the guests didn't recognize it, but the hotel staff did. It was the atmospheric alert. Keith Baldwin froze mid-conversation with an important delegate. His face paled as he looked at the warning lights now flashing on the wall panels. At the same moment, in the special section reserved for methane-breathing species, the Crawl ambassador suddenly clutched his breathing apparatus. 2 other delegates collapsed to the floor, their breathing tubes making horrible gasping sounds. "Emergency!" shouted a Voshian aide. "The air mix is wrong. They're suffocating." Panic spread through the reception. Delegates rushed in all directions. Security personnel tried to maintain order but were overwhelmed by the chaos. Keith rushed to the wall panel and pressed the emergency button. Nothing happened. The backup system should have activated automatically, but they didn't respond. "Get the engineering team here now," he shouted at a nearby staff member. Zixalora stood frozen, her scales now pale with shock. This couldn't be happening. Not during her perfect reception. Then she remembered Jack's warning. The human had tried to tell her about problems with the atmospheric systems, and she had dismissed him. A cold feeling settled in her stomach. "Communications are down," someone shouted. "We can't reach outside help." This was standard procedure during high-level diplomatic meetings. To prevent spying, all communications were blocked except for authorized channels. But now it meant they couldn't call for emergency assistance. "The methane-breathing delegates need help immediately," a medical officer announced. "We have minutes, not hours." Keith looked around desperately. "Where's the engineering team? Where? Is Greg?" "Sir," Megan said, pushing through the crowd to reach him. "The maintenance worker, Jack. He was trying to warn us about the atmospheric systems earlier today. He might know what to do." "Find him," Keith ordered. "Now." Megan ran toward the service elevators. As the doors opened, Jack rushed out, nearly colliding with her. "The methane regulators have failed," he said without preamble. "I've bypassed the damaged systems, but I need access to the main control room to restore proper function." The delegates are suffering, Megan told him. It's exactly what you warned about. Jack nodded grimly. Take me to them. I need to see how bad it is before I can set the right parameters. They hurried back to the reception hall. The scene was chaotic. Medical staff were attending to the collapsed delegates, but their equipment wasn't designed for methane-breathing physiology. Who is in charge here? Jack called out. Keith rushed over. I'm the manager. Who are you? Jack Harlow. I can fix this, but I need immediate access to the main control room. That's a restricted area, a security officer objected. People are dying, Jack snapped. Do you want to explain to the Galactic Council why you let 3 ambassadors die because of security protocols? Keith made a quick decision. Take him there now. The security officer hesitated, then nodded. As they rushed toward the control room, Zixalora stepped in their path. Her usual confidence was gone, replaced by genuine fear. You, she said to Jack. You tried to warn us. Not now, Jack said, pushing past her. Zixalora followed them to the control room. Inside, the chief engineer and his team were frantically working at the controls, with no success. Move, Jack said, his voice now carrying an authority that made everyone stop and look at him. Who is this? The chief engineer demanded. Just let him try, Keith ordered. Jack stepped to the main console and pulled a small device from his pocket. He plugged it into the system and began typing commands at incredible speed. Streams of code flowed across the screen. Impossible, the chief engineer whispered. He's bypassing security protocols that should take hours to crack. Jack didn't respond. His focus was complete as his fingers danced across the keyboard. After 2 tense minutes, he hit a final key. There, he said. The backup system is reactivated and the methane mix is stabilizing. It will take about 3 minutes to reach proper levels. He unplugged his device and turned to the security officer. We need to get the affected delegates to the medical bay immediately. The atmosphere there can be controlled more precisely. How did you do that? The chief engineer asked. Those systems are locked down tight. I know the override codes, Jack said simply. That's not possible, the man sputtered. Only the highest level administrators have those codes. Exactly, Jack said, giving him a look that made the engineer step back in confusion. Zixalora stared at Jack, her mind racing. This was no ordinary maintenance worker. No one could have that level of access unless… Who are you really? She asked quietly. Jack ignored her question. Mr. Baldwin, we need to get those delegates medical attention immediately, and then we need to talk about your hotel's security. Someone deliberately sabotaged those systems. Keith nodded, his face grave. Of course, whatever you need. As they left the control room, whispers followed them. The staff looked at Jack with new eyes, confusion and respect mingling in their expressions. Zixalora followed at a distance, her scales now a mottled gray color that showed her distress. The human she had dismissed and mocked had just saved the hotel from disaster, and somehow he had access to systems that only the highest authorities could control. A terrible suspicion began to form in her mind. 2 hours after the crisis, the hotel had returned to a tense calm. The affected delegates were recovering in the medical bay. Security teams were investigating how the atmospheric systems had been tampered with. The reception had been postponed until the next day. Keith Baldwin called an emergency meeting of all department heads in the hotel's main conference room. Everyone sat around the large oval table speaking in hushed voices. Rumors were flying about what had happened and who was responsible. Zixalora sat stiffly in her chair, her scales still showing the muted gray of distress. She had not spoken to anyone since the incident. Her mind kept replaying how she had treated Jack, the warnings she had ignored, the lives that had nearly been lost because of her arrogance. The door opened, and Keith entered. Everyone fell silent. To their surprise, Jack walked in behind him. He had changed out of his jumpsuit and now wore a simple but clearly expensive dark blue suit. He looked different, his posture straighter, his face more serious. Keith cleared his throat. Thank you all for coming. Before we discuss what happened today, there's something you all need to know. He gestured to Jack. "This is Jonathan Harlow." A few people nodded, looking confused. The name meant nothing to them. "Perhaps this will help," Keith said, touching a control on the table. The large screen on the wall lit up, showing a corporate profile. At the top was Jack's face, next to the name Jonathan Harlow, founder and CEO, Galactic Hospitality Group. Gasps filled the room. Everyone knew the Galactic Hospitality Group. It owned not just this hotel, but hundreds of luxury establishments across 3 sectors of space. It was one of the largest hospitality companies in the galaxy. "Mr. Harlow is our employer," Keith continued, his voice shaking slightly. "He's been conducting an unannounced inspection of our hotel." All eyes turned to Jack, or rather Jonathan, with expressions of shock and fear. Several staff members who had been rude to him over the past 2 days looked ready to faint. Alora sat frozen, her scales now almost white with shock. She had mocked and dismissed the owner of the entire company, the being who controlled her career and livelihood, the human she had forced to stay in a tiny service room while treating other guests like royalty. "Thank you, Keith," Jonathan said calmly. "I think we should focus on what matters right now, the safety of our guests." "Of course, sir," Keith said quickly. "First, the good news," Jonathan continued. "The affected delegates are all recovering. Well, no permanent harm was done, thanks to quick medical attention. The bad news is that this was clearly sabotage, not an accident." "Sabotage?" someone gasped. "Who would do such a thing?" "That's what security is investigating," Jonathan said. "But my immediate concern is the other systems in the hotel. If one system was tampered with, others might be as well." He touched the table controls, and the screen changed to show complex diagrams of the hotel's systems. "I've done a preliminary check of all critical functions. There appear to be issues with the gravity controls in the Centaurian wing and the water filtration systems for the aquatic delegates. These need to be fixed immediately." The chief engineer, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "Sir, with all due respect, how do you know all this? These systems are incredibly complex. It would take weeks for someone to learn them well enough to spot problems like this." Jonathan smiled slightly. "I designed them." Another wave of murmurs swept the room. "Before I built my company, I was an engineer," Jonathan explained. "I specialized in multi-species habitat systems. I still design the key systems for all our major properties. This hotel was one of my personal projects 5 years ago." The chief engineer looked stunned. "I had no idea." "Few people do," Jonathan said. "I prefer to work behind the scenes." He turned to Keith. "I need your best engineers working on these issues immediately. We can't risk another failure." "Of course, sir," Keith said. "Greg, assemble your team right away." The chief engineer nodded and hurried out, already calling staff on his communication device. "As for the rest of you," Jonathan continued, "I want honest answers. I've been at this hotel for nearly 2 days posing as a maintenance worker. I've seen how things really operate here when you don't know the owner is watching. The room was so quiet you could hear everyone breathing. I've observed staff treating certain species, particularly humans, with disrespect. I've seen security protocols ignored. I've witnessed maintenance issues reported but never addressed." His voice was calm but firm. "This is not what the Galactic Hospitality Group stands for. This is not what I built this company to be." Several department heads looked down at the table, unable to meet his eyes. "Sir," one of them finally said, "we had no idea the standards had slipped so badly. We will correct these issues immediately." "Yes, you will," Jonathan agreed. "Starting tomorrow, we will implement a complete review of all operations at this hotel. Every protocol, every system, every staff member." Alora finally found her voice. "Mr. Harlow," she said, her musical voice trembling slightly. "I must apologize for how I treated you. There is no excuse for my behavior." All eyes turned to her, then back to Jonathan. Everyone wondered what he would say to the receptionist who had been so openly disrespectful to him. Jonathan looked at her steadily. "No, there isn't," he agreed, "but that's a discussion for another time. Right now, our guests' safety is the priority. He turned back to address the whole room. I built this company on a simple principle. Every guest deserves respect and excellent service, regardless of their species, status, or appearance. Somewhere along the way, this hotel forgot that principle. The rebuke hung in the air, making everyone uncomfortable. I'll be staying for the remainder of the summit, Jonathan continued. Not as a mechanic this time, but as the owner. I expect to see immediate improvements in how this hotel operates. Keith nodded eagerly. We won't disappoint you, sir. I hope not, Jonathan said. Because I won't be the only one watching. Every delegate in that reception today saw how this hotel responded to a crisis. They saw which staff members stepped up to help and which ones didn't. The reputation of this hotel, and by extension our entire company, is now at stake. He stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. I'll be in the owner's suite if anyone needs me. Keith will meet in an hour to discuss next steps. As Jonathan walked out, everyone remained seated, too shocked to move. The owner of the company had been among them for 2 days, watching everything. And now they all had to face the consequences of their actions, or inactions. Zixalora stayed in her chair long after others had left, her scales now showing the deep blue of shame and regret. She had judged Jonathan based on his species and appearance, never bothering to look deeper. And in doing so, she had not only embarrassed herself, but endangered guests and damaged the hotel's reputation. She wondered if she would still have a job tomorrow. The following morning, all hotel staff gathered in the main ballroom. The room was silent except for the soft shuffling of feet and nervous whispers. Everyone had heard about Jonathan Harlow's true identity by now. Many worried about their jobs. Zixalora stood at the back of the room, alone. Other staff members avoided her. Some blamed her for drawing the owner's attention to their problems. Her scales were a dull gray, showing her stress and worry. The side door opened and Jonathan walked in with Keith Baldwin and several other executives from the company headquarters. They took seats at a table on the small stage at the front of the room. Good morning, Jonathan said, his voice carrying easily through the large space. I know there are many rumors going around, so I wanted to speak to all of you directly. He looked around the room, making eye contact with various staff members. When his gaze fell on Zixalora briefly, she looked down at the floor. First, I want to address the sabotage issue, Jonathan continued. Security has identified the person responsible. It was not one of you. It was a delegate's aide who was trying to disrupt the trade talks for political reasons. They have been handed over to Galactic security forces. A wave of relief swept through the room. At least no one would be blamed for that part of the disaster. Now regarding the hotel operations, Jonathan said, his tone becoming more serious. My inspection found numerous problems that need to be addressed. Some of you might wonder why I chose to inspect the hotel disguised as a maintenance worker. He paused, looking around the room again. I've found that people show their true character when they think no one important is watching. Some of you treated me with respect and kindness despite believing I was just a mechanic. Others, he didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone knew who he meant. Today I'm announcing several changes, Jonathan said. First, this hotel will undergo a complete systems upgrade. Our newer properties have better safety protocols and fail-safes that might have prevented yesterday's crisis. The chief engineer nodded in agreement. Second, all staff will participate in new training programs focusing on cross-species respect and communication. This is not optional. The Galactic Hospitality Group serves beings from over 50 species. If you cannot treat all of them with equal respect, you cannot work for this company. Many staff members nodded their understanding. Third, Jonathan continued, there will be changes in personnel. The room grew even quieter. Everyone held their breath. Keith Baldwin will remain as hotel manager, Jonathan announced. He responded well during the crisis and has shown genuine commitment to improving operations. Keith looked surprised but pleased. Megan Porter is being promoted to assistant manager of guest relations, Jonathan continued. Her concern for guests of all species and her willingness to help in a crisis demonstrate the qualities we value. Megan's eyes widened in shock. Several colleagues patted her on the back in congratulation. Several other staff members will be reassigned to different positions based on their performance and attitudes observed during my inspection, Jonathan said. Your department heads will speak with you individually later today. He paused, and everyone knew what was coming next. All eyes shifted toward Zixalora. As for those who demonstrated prejudice or disrespect toward guests or staff based on their species, Jonathan said, I have a decision to make. Zixalora raised her head and straightened her posture. If she was going to be fired, she would at least face it with dignity. The easy choice would be to simply terminate your employment, Jonathan said. But that doesn't solve the larger problem. Prejudice exists throughout the galaxy. Firing a few individuals won't change that. He looked directly at Zixalora now. So I'm offering a choice to those who showed such attitudes. You can either accept reassignment to our training academy on Earth, where you'll learn firsthand about human culture and work alongside humans as equals, or you can resign from the company immediately. Whispers broke out across the room. The training academy was well known. It was where the company's most promising employees were sent to advance their careers. Being sent there as a punishment was unusual. This is not a demotion, Jonathan clarified. Those who complete the program successfully can return to their current positions or even advance. But those who cannot learn to treat all species with equal respect will not be welcome in this company. He stood up. I built this company from nothing. I started as an engineer who saw a need for truly inclusive hospitality in the galaxy. Every species has different needs, different customs, different biology. But they all deserve respect. That principle is non-negotiable. The room was silent as his words sank in. You have until the end of the day to make your decision, Jonathan said, looking at Zixalora and a few others who had been singled out. The rest of you, please support your colleagues during this transition. We all have biases to overcome. With that, he ended the meeting. As people began to file out, Megan approached Zixalora. What will you do? She asked quietly. Zixalora's scales shifted colors several times as she considered her options. I don't know, she admitted. The thought of living among humans, she shuddered slightly. They're not so bad once you get to know them, Megan said with a small smile. Some of them even own hotel chains. Despite herself, Zixalora let out a small laugh. I deserved that. Later that afternoon, Zixalora stood outside the door to the owner's suite. She had made her decision. She pressed the call button and waited, nervously. The door opened and Jonathan stood there looking at her with a neutral expression. Mr. Harlow, she said, her musical voice steady despite her anxiety. I've made my choice. I would like to accept the position at the Earth Training Academy. Jonathan studied her for a moment. May I ask why? Zixalora's scales shifted to a deep blue of sincerity. Because you're right. I judged you based on your species, not your character or abilities. I need to learn better. And... She hesitated. I want to prove that I can be better than that. Jonathan nodded, a small smile forming on his lips. That's a good start, Zixalora. Learning to admit our mistakes is the first step toward fixing them. I truly am sorry, she said softly. I know, Jonathan replied. Now you have the chance to turn that regret into growth. Don't waste it. As Zixalora walked away, she felt a strange mix of emotions. The future would be challenging. Living and working among humans would push her far outside her comfort zone. But for the first time, she wondered what she might learn from them and perhaps what they might learn from her.